we'll move on. Does anybody need a break? If you do, they will let me have a 5-minute break. So just down the hall, Matt, you're the bathroom guardian. Okay. Now we're going to move on to, we're right on time too, by the way, our legislative and legal update. So we'll ask if Hugh, if that's for Hugh and Amy, will please come up. Of course, Hugh Johnson is our legislative coordinator, and Amy Bason is our wonderful attorney to give us some reports. Hugh, you heard Ann give her report on the sales tax initiative, and we tasked Hugh with doing away with that whole legislation so there wouldn't be no argument with inside the association. So he's going to give us a report on how he's good on that. So Hugh, there's not only that piece of legislation, but many more that are affecting counties. So Hugh, welcome. Welcome to Macon County, and you have the floor, sir.
Thanks, Ronnie. And Johanna was going to be here, but our bill to basically repeal the school board lawsuit authority was in committee today at the last second. There's been so many bills introduced that it didn't get to it. And thank you for having us. I've never been to Tennessee before. Ronnie told me that Macon County is just outside of Tennessee. Based on that, and I live in Raleigh, I'm just outside of Greensboro. Thank you. Right, so there's a lot of bills introduced. I'm going to go through, and maybe you can jump in. He's the boss of it, just tell me he's going to jump in. There have been over 1,600 bills introduced so far across both chambers. Keep that number in mind as we move forward. Crossover is coming up, and most of you probably know what that is, but General Assembly gives itself a timeline for which bills that don't deal with money or taxes or fees or finance have to pass one chamber and get in the next chamber by that date. That date is April 30th. If bills don't get that, then they're not eligible for the rest of the session. So crossover is next Thursday. I think that's Thursday. So it's going to be really, really, really busy next week, even more so than this week. Budget work should begin soon. We've heard from the House, which will start the budget at May 1st when they get some new projections after the April 15th tax collections. We've heard from the House that they'll really start hammering down, and we should see something hopefully in May. The House starts the budget process, after which the Senate takes it up. For those of you who remember, we do every biennium, we set up a county caucus on interesting county issues. 4 times to vet county issues on behalf of other legislators. We've got a really successful caucus so far. Senators Davis, Jim Davis, and Valerie Fichu are chairing the Senate version of that, and Representative Chuck Grady and Becky Carney are chairing the House caucus. And we had a County 101, which we started to do now every biennium for freshman legislators. We had 8 of, I think, a dozen freshman legislators show up to hear about county issues, and 8 of a dozen or so. But it was a good turnout, a really good discussion. We did a deep dive into the school financing issue with Karen Malonzi there from the School of Government Committee you might have worked with. Gave a really good explanation of what your responsibilities are as county commissioners on the school financing issue. So I'm going to jump into our priority goals. As y'all know from our conference in Moore County, we have 5 priority goals. Continue state funding of Medicaid and defense against the reversal of the Medicaid swap, which we heard initial conversations even in jest at the beginning of the session, which always worries us. We've basically tamped that down, and we don't expect any reversal of that Medicaid swap. It's always good to keep talking about that. That way, members, especially with freshmen coming in, that they don't think, that way they know the situation as it stands. Priority goal 2, seek the restoration of 40% lottery proceeds, which we know have been reduced down to about 17 to 20%. That'll shake out in the budget, so stay tuned for that. But we've had some conversations with Representatives John Bell in particular on some solutions to that, maybe to help get some more money into this and get distributed to counties. But as for the proceeds, which is an annual appropriation, that'll shake out the budget. Past y'all have gotten $100 million, and we'll see where that goes. The governor's budget did include that $100 million, but no, This is one I mentioned earlier, the statutory authority for school boards to sue. We've got a bill introduced. Sponsors Jeff Collins, Deborah Conrad, among others. We're hearing good feedback from both former county commissioners and members of the General Assembly who might not have had any issue we didn't think would. Or think after we explained it to them, they actually really start to get it and realize the severity of that situation, particularly after what happened in Union County. So Amy will give a legal update on that issue as well. But we do have a bill introduced, and we will be supporting that going forward. Hopefully we'll get out of committee on Monday or Tuesday. And then the last two goals, or annual goals, impose unfunded mandates and shifting transportation responsibilities. We're always working on that with members. I'm going to jump into some of our addressing goals. House 726 is the one I'm talking about. School boards can't sue counties. Again, that was supposed to be committee today. They just didn't have time to get to it with the time, so hopefully we'll get it done next week. At least in the House, I should say. House Bill 506, Sam's been working really hard on this one. The 911 fund flexibility. It passed out of one committee. We've got to go to finance next, after which we'll go to the House floor, and then over to the Senate. Big thing now is we're going to cross over with that one, but we've had a lot of good introduction and leadership from James Bowles on that one. But keep that bill in mind to get all more flexibility on your 911 fund dollars. House Bill 432 is what I've been working on heavily. It deals with internet infrastructure, and I've spoken with many of you about this, and it is a step in a long process to help counties, and especially our rural and mountain counties, get more access to the internet. This bill is going to give you all some authority to, where possible, invest in your own infrastructure, similar to the grant authority that Senator Davis and Representative Collins worked on a couple years ago. We will be working on this bill and this issue for a long time on your behalf. We understand from many of you, especially out here in Macon County and the mountains, lack of quality internet access is a huge problem. I grew up in a very populated area, and I talked to members who tell the legislature who tell me you can't imagine how bad it is out here for many of their citizens. So we're working on that for you. And then House Bill 430 and Senate Bill 422 is our annual county omnibus bill. It's a handful of our legislative goals, 4 in fact, that are relatively non-controversial, a couple studies, a couple of clarifications. Shouldn't see a problem with that. It is not subject to crossover because there's a small clarification of a fee in there, so we're not rushing that one too much, but it's already passed out of one committee. It's got to go to finance in the House, but no real concerns there. And then House Bill 518 is our sales tax bill that Representative Hunter, former president of the association, worked on our behalf. Through our efforts and his efforts, we were able to get Jason Sane, who is our Republican finance leader, on board on that bill, along with Representative Ed Haynes and Forsyth County Representative Mitchell Setzer. Again, that bill is basically similar to what we saw in 1224 last year, which gives counties flexibility on a couple of the sales tax articles.
Hugh, I don't want to interrupt. I know there'll be some questions on that. Let's go back to age 432. Our district representative, Connie Orr from Graham County, who you'll be hearing from tonight at supper. Connie is sitting right back here, but the top of her county names, like in Graham County and a lot of Macon County, we do have the Balsam Loop here because of the private-public partnership, which a lot of folks farther west does not have. And it's $1 million a mile. So, I mean, so where to tell us, I mean, is that just another, I mean, we've heard this for years and years, and Connie and I have had this discussion. We've had this discussion on a regional basis. Where does that really stand? Where's
This bill?
Yeah. Is it just another floater out there that, I mean, tell us the truth.
The bill, we've had it scheduled and in committee yesterday, and Johanna and I started talking to some legislators, and there were a couple members on that committee that were frankly concerned about local government role in this and competing with the private sector. There were concerns raised that anything like this or similar to that grant bill come up and then possibly not succeed, which means it likely wouldn't be able to be considered at all this year again. We decided just to have a bill for discussion and hear some concerns from members, and then we had a good discussion in committee. Representative Thompson is committed to this fight and said he will take it back to his caucus and see what they think. But that's where we are now. We need to get it out of the Public Utilities Committee first, then the Finance Committee in the House, and then on the floor. But frankly, that's where we are.
Okay, well, and I don't want to get just in the West, but it goes all the way up, Watauga, Mitchell, those counties, in the far, the north too, not only in the far west, but, we've had this thing for, we've had the lobbyists there who play a huge role in this, by the way, who supply the service. We've been down that road also. So anyway, this is huge for, because, for most of us in this room, we take that for granted. It's, most counties don't not even think twice about that in your school, in your businesses. So, so thank you, Hugh, for telling us the truth. I think you did.
You're exactly right about that. And I think when discussing this, we like to frame it around education is a big way of arguing this. If you think about it, when schools in the state, there are ways for schools to get connected, but the student can't get it. As many of you know, if the student doesn't have connection at home. Representative Dobson pointed this out. He has students in McDowell County that have to actually drive to McDonald's to do their homework because they don't have internet at home, which is, that's just not right. And so that's what and that's not a choice either. That is they forced to do that because they don't have access. And that's what we're working on.
I'm curious. The internet's been around for a couple of decades now. People out in the rural areas still don't have internet. Who do they think we're competing with for the service? I mean, it's been 20 years and nobody's done it. How much competition is there? I mean, I understand, the politics of, we don't want the government interfering with the private sector, and there's always pressure from them in that regard. But it seems like kind of a moot point after a couple of decades.
But to their credit, the providers have, and Ronnie mentioned some of the lobbyists, we do have good relationships with the providers, and they've been working with Johanna and I on this pretty closely from the start. It's kind of they're worried about any crack in the door could lead to competition, and we try to stress that that's not the case. This is truly an example of a public-private partnership with what our counties want to do to help bring internet access. Yeah. And that's the best way for us to argue it, I think, is it is in fact a partnership between us and them to get them more customers, to help your residents, your citizens to get better internet access. If you're talking to your members, stress that for decades y'all haven't had access, and at some point we need to try something new. So,
I thought there was more of a push to say, look, this is almost like a basic right, like electricity or whatever. It's not getting done. So, I'll say.
So the place we're trying to focus our attention is so these are smaller providers, and I was out at a function in Western Carolina. Yeah, you were there. And so what we heard there was that there are small providers out here willing to take, to take the service, but the big boys are scared that they're going to take their business, but they don't have the pipeline, that middle mile piece. And so this bill is trying to focus on getting you the ability to build that middle mile, and then lease it out to that small provider. And so that's the area of focus we're trying to talk about and create that conversation at the General Assembly. And I feel like we've had the best success in sort of resonating that we've had in quite some time. But the big boys, the big telecoms, have a lot of influence down there. And what he's talking about is they don't want that foot in the door, that crack in the wall, that they might see, somebody else have that ability to come in.
The middle mile argument is a key point of this too. The last mile, which is where it's just going to be too expensive for anyone but private provider, but where counties can help is with that middle mile. And that's the other thing we're arguing for is that it's up to the private side of that partnership to really come in and finish the job, but y'all can set the table for them to help bring more access. And again, it is truly a partnership with the private sector to bring internet to your citizens rather than competition. We can keep talking about this, so that's fine.
Yeah, I don't want to get us off on the weeds. We need to move on. Something really is like taking your sales tax.
So a couple of other bills, and I mentioned that there are over 1,600 bills introduced. We've only mentioned a handful to y'all tonight. I'm going to mention a handful more. Senate Bill 210 we did not introduce, but it would satisfy one of our goals. To her credit, Senator Trudy Wade decided to go out and fight this fight again, but this would allow cities and counties and the public to notice publications electronically. And this is a bill, 832, is something that's come up actually pretty recently. This would satisfy our child care subsidy goal. As many of you know, we have a goal to go back to a lot of the child care subsidy policies of the past biennium, including income calculations for some of the parents or the guardians. The bill was introduced, and Representative Johnson is also one of the sponsors. He's been really helpful to us on a lot of issues, and we're helping with this where we can. So please keep that one in mind as approved. I don't think we have mentioned it in any district meetings. And some negative bills that I want to highlight. House Bill 168, Senate Bill 321. Y'all have probably heard about this a couple times from us. It would basically any improvements to building property that a builder does are exempt from property taxes. So for up to 5 years, so they could improve property over 5 years and never pay property tax, and then they sell it, and in that 5th year, whoever buys it pays that property tax for the 5th year, but those previous years they aren't paying tax. So we look at this as we think, based on our projections, it's a $50 million annual impact to counties, average across the state. So that could be more or less in your county, but every county would see some losses, we think, from this. House Bill 255, and this one hasn't gone anywhere. We're still monitoring it, but we haven't seen that one move. House Bill 255 did make crossover. This is one we've gotten to a better point than it used to be. The original bill would have set up some really serious conflict between building inspectors and the home builders, and we were able to mitigate a lot of that. One thing it would have done was eliminate plan review, so where counties and cities can come in with the builder and review plans ahead of time to make sure they're not going to run into any problems down the line. They were trying to eliminate that. Well, our argument was that's going to raise insurance rates over the long run and going to create headaches for everyone that have to go in and rip out parts of the house and rebuild if it's not done right. That was taken out of the bill, so we've gotten to a pretty good point. We're still going to try to make some tweaks in the Senate, but it's in a lot better shape than it was before. Then House Bill 128, I believe, failed today. Committee, though, I'm not. Sam was working on it today. We've been working on it since it got introduced. Representative Speciale introduced this bill to require just about all of your debt to go to a referendum, which you can imagine creates problems, especially if there's an emergency scenario and you need to replace buildings or sheriff's vehicles or whatnot in the immediate. And so, again, I've only mentioned a handful of bills. Since 1,600 bills have been introduced, you're probably thinking, well, what else is out there? Well, in any of those bills, there could be a number of little provisions. So the whole bill is too complicated for us to highlight, or we just don't have the time to, but we're looking at all of those bills for individual provisions that we might have problems with, and that comes up all the time. And so we work on those, but sometimes it's just too much to mention at once. So 1,600 bills introduced. All of those we have to keep track of and look at to make sure there is no negative impact to counties that we want to defend against, or positive impact we might want to highlight to ensure that it gets to the General Assembly.
Well, Hugh, we appreciate your efforts and Johanna's and Sam's and everybody, your whole team. And we know it's a lot of work. We do appreciate the updates, the daily communications, whether it's good or bad, for the counties. And they have a lot of things been bad. That's true. So, but we could talk to Hugh what we want to do. You'll have plenty of chances tonight. We'll have a booth at the dinner for you, and you will get in line and ask him about any legislation that you want. I do want to mention one thing before Kevin comes. We talk about redistribution of sales tax, and it's something that's not been filed yet, but just don't know where you stand on it. Don't matter. But the governor's asked for the bond referendum to be put in November, on this November, in the ballot. Now, to our county, that is huge money. To have something offering a non-ballot on an open ballot when there's no election. It costs this county about 40 grand. Now, you do that 100 counties, the larger counties are much more. Glenn's county would be probably quadruple that. It's going to cost us a lot of money to have, whether you support the bond referendum, that's not the point. We would like to see this, as far as all our budgets are so tight. And I think we would, and we're going to mention this, that we would like to see that whether you support the bond referendum or not, that's not the point. That's not what we're going after. But we would like to see this done when the general elections are done. On that same ballot, and not be a cost to the counties. You put that on 100 counties, what it's going to cost statewide is millions of dollars to hold that election. Yes, Ms. Helen.
Well, in that vein, Mr. President, didn't a bill pass last session that disallows us at the county level from doing referenda in the off years? Isn't that correct?
It allows us, but we are an arm of the state, and
no, it doesn't allow us. And so,
but
I'm
the
saying
state can
the
do it.
state's doing it seems a little hypocritical.
Oh, did he didn't say that. But anyway, it is a big expense to all of our counties, and whether this goes and if they decide to do it, we would ask that a check be sent along with. But it's a huge expense, and I think the turnout for an off-year in a referendum is almost nil. I mean, compared to what that we're doing. If they wait to be done during a presidential election, the turnout should be good. But anyway, we just wanted to mention that. We don't get hung up that. Ms. Renee. Yeah. We'll have to pay for that also, by the way. So.
I don't know if this is the appropriate time to ask you or not about this, but Wake County has sort of been, beaten up by the General Assembly, and particularly as it relates to the way that we vote. Do you have any comments on that? I mean, that was horrible legislation that went through the House and the Senate both in 2 days. I mean, it really, for those of you who don't know, they really changed the way that our commissioners in our county are elected. And heretofore, everyone got to vote for every single person that was running. That no longer will be true with the new legislation. And it just bothers me that they choose a county, just one county, and just pounce on them like that. I know that some of you haven't been touched, but I can tell you that given any day of the week, it could happen. And not only that, they did that to our school board, and also they have done, the General Assembly has done that in a couple of other ways to us. And I guess I'm really beginning to get a little paranoid about it, because I've always been accepting of the fact that most of which they do, I can't change, and I'm not going to make a difference. As long as my voice is heard, I feel, and I did go and testify on behalf of the one bill that has to do with the elections, but I don't hear anyone listening.
Well, I mean, all of us, regardless of politics, we watched Wake County and what can happen. This can happen in any county in this room, or any county that we represent as an association, and we know that. It's unprecedented what took place. And so it is a concern. And we had this conversation privately with Kevin and several of our executive committee, with Glenn, with Fred, and with Brenda. And there's not. It literally went through in 2 days.
It did go through in 2 days. And the one thing I would say, having been a member of this organization for a long time, I never think about what her party is or his, or, you know, and I hope you don't really think about what my party is, because we're here just for the same reasons to support the counties. And I think that is so important that we do that. So I would hope that we don't allow this legislation to become something that we would set forth and decide, hey, you know, I'd like to see those people down in Caroline County not be able to elect their people, except for a few people, they could do that. But when people on the state level choose to come down on one county, and I mean, they live in our county, good heavens, Betsy, you know, for a number of months a year. And this has just been more than I could take. I just do not understand it, and I think most people don't understand it. I know that you guys understand it, and you understand it full well. But do we have it? I mean, there is a lawsuit. There's a lawsuit that is in court now towards the end of making them revert it back.
Executive Director Leonard is going to give a full talk report on that legislation, and it does affect us. Real quickly, Kevin.
Just to go back to the topic, we were talking about the cost of elections. I saw there was a bill titled something about second primaries, and I don't know if you did you see that? There was some kind of bill about second primaries. What did it say? Does it help us?
I did see that. I'm trying to remember the bill number off my head. I need to look at it before I can say whether or not it helps or simply look at it more. I just did note it on my list of things to track.
We get rid of those, that would help.
Yeah, I think it would, but I don't want to commit to that without double checking. So, Commissioner, I'll look at that and get right back to you.
Thank you. Executive Director Leonard, you're going to come and you're going to tell us about how the sales tax redistribution will not affect our counties. We're all going to have a moment, and it does affect Macon County very adversely, by the way, where you're sitting at. What really affects us, of course, is after 3 years, you have to go with your hat in your hand to get your sales tax. Because our population is here, but our sales tax revenue is here because of our population, tourism, basically. So those are counties it really affects. So it affects us to the tune of over $1 million. So where you're sitting at, that's about 2.5 cents on our tax rate. So, and after 3 years, of course, it'll become state tax, whether you're for it or against it. Like Ann, we appreciate her standing in the gap. But it's not, we don't need to be a divisive issue in this association. But anything that helps one county, and if Vance County wants to pass a resolution of support, we fully understand that. We'll probably have one in, you know, I've received several in my email, if y'all have, of counties who are totally against this. So what we're going to do is, our executive director, that's his responsibility to oversee very controversial bills such as this, and to make those bills where they do not cross over and hit some new points. It's like the Wake County bill. I'm sorry, Bailey, that he wasn't on, that he let that happen.
I don't live in there.
Okay.
It was unfortunate that it happened.
Well, Kevin and I have had this, we've had this conversation about, because we are worried about what it does to our counties and our relationships with one another. And it is a real concern, because without each other, we are zilch. So, I said enough about that, Mr. Levy. It's all up to you now. You folks are looking at you.
Thank you, Mr. President. I appreciate your faith and confidence. Tracy just gave me a quarter raise. I appreciate that. Also on that booth, when Hugh's at the booth, the advice booth was a nickel, but because of financial issues, we have had to raise it to 10 cents. So I just wanted to let you know that. And I have to tell you, the person who is the happiest about all of this is David Thompson. And believe you me, I called him and I said, now, how did you know this? And your timing is impeccable. So anyway, no. Oh, his in-laws. His in-laws are, yes. So, the best way to describe this, and many of you have heard what I've described around at the district meetings, and I know that I'm getting ready to start onto a topic that we could talk the rest of this evening about. And I see that our special guest is with us for our next event. So what I thought I could do best, and Amy needs to tell you about Union County too, because that's a pretty big deal that we've heard out in Union County. But the best thing I think I can do is do three things. One, tell you where we are, because I'm going to go ahead and start with everybody knows what the heck we're talking about on the sales tax. So there are winners and losers for all of our counties. I appreciate Commissioner Holden talking about that straight up at the top of the meeting. So I'll tell you about where we are. I'll make you an offer of what I can do for you. And then I'll listen to anything you want to tell me. Number one, I'm in communications with Senator Brown and Senator Apodaca. Where's Charlie Messer? He must have stepped out. And we're working on a solution, and that's what those conversations are about. The offer is that if you need me to come to your county, I have been to multiple counties already across this entire state to talk to your boards, to talk to you individually about what this means for the association and for your county. I have sat with rural counties, I have sat with larger counties, urban counties, and my phone's been ringing off the hook telling me, we like this. My phone's been ringing off the hook saying, we don't like this. And so what I've been frank with all of our members about, and just, that's the only way to deal with this issue, especially from the association's perspective, is to stand here in front of you and tell you that this is a tough issue. And it's not foreign. I've talked to Patrice about this. This is not unique. This comes about occasionally with the association. And the General Assembly puts us in a spot where we're in contradiction with ourselves. Neil Emery, a county manager who's on our staff, former county manager who's on our staff, we were recently in the county talking about how delicate this matter was, and the commissioner said, I just don't know if we need to stay in the association. You know, we're not being represented well enough. And then he came around, and I think we talked to him enough that he understood the position well enough to know that we're looking out for the counties 5, 10, 20 years from now, and if the state turns this tax into a statewide tax, it's not your tax anymore. And we're in the same position as the lottery again. And you're only left with your property tax and your 2/4 cent taxes. And he said, well, gosh, Kevin, do you think there's a solution to this problem? And Neil said, I believe there is a solution. If there's a solution that can be found, this association can do it, because we did so in Medicaid. And that's one complicated situation, let me tell you, Medicaid. If we can do that, we can tackle this. And I really think that we can. I do not have the solution to tell you what it is today, but I can tell you where I'm starting to understand better through my conversations that I have had with county commissioners across this state. The answer to this problem is not one fix. It's not the 518 bill, which is Representative Howard Hunter's legislation, along with others, has been introduced. That gives you greater flexibility in those articles, those 1/4 cent sales taxes. And I've talked to commissioners across the state who said, that's great, I'd love to be able to raise that revenue, it's not enough. But maybe I don't want to raise taxes on my citizens. So that's not all the solution. That's part of the solution. So what I'm starting to center in on is that it's going to be a multifaceted approach. That's part of it. Reconfiguring the lottery funds is likely a big part of it. And I candidly told Senator Brown that if they hadn't taken the 40% of our lottery dollars, we might not be having this conversation. And he agreed with me that he's always supported 100% of those dollars should be going to our school capital. So I think there's actually an opportunity there to have that conversation with him. So while we're developing that multifaceted approach, and I'm all ears, number 3, if you've got ideas, I'd love to hear it. But we're working very hard, your team's working very hard to develop that. That's one piece of the internals on this particular issue. The other piece piece that is critical is to make sure that our communication, our lines of communication are open with the Senate leadership. And I'm happy to report that they are, and they're good, and they're strong. That's in large part due to your relationships with your members. I called Senator Apodaca this week, and he answered my phone. He called, so that's positive, right? So he spoke with me, and I said, so Senator Apodaca, I was wondering if you're going to be in Henderson County on Friday. I'd like to drop by to see you. And he said, no, I'm not going to be there, but what you want to talk about? I said, well, it's obviously about the sales tax stuff. And he said, well, I'll tell you what, Kevin, why don't we wait until about 2 weeks or a little bit more, because we're getting through crossover. We're not going to do anything with that legislation until then. I said, are you okay with me telling the board this? And he said, absolutely, because he knew we were having this meeting up here. So he and I are going to sit down. We're going to chat about that, chat about ideas that we're coming up with. And I have been in exchange voicemails with Senator Brown, and he and I have a meeting set on Tuesday at 3:30 to sit down and talk to him about this. And I want to tell you this, what I've been telling folks across the entire state is that I applaud Senator Brown. And we need to applaud Senator Brown for at least raising the conversation. And that's all that he wanted to do. He said to me, I just want to raise this conversation so we can start talking about it. Because he represents Onslow and Jones County, and Jones County is in some tough situation, and there are other counties like Jones County who are in that situation. And this is the only idea that he's come up with to address Jones County's situation. And he said, I just want to start the conversation. We need to have it. So I've been telling commissioners all across the state, we need to applaud Senator Brown for at least having the courage to bring it up. It's up to us now to try to figure out if we can come up with a solution to his problem that positively impacts all 100 counties. So I'd like to report to you that the communications, the lines of communications are open with the Senate leadership, the people that are running the bill, and that's very positive. That's good. They're not including us. The House, right now, the House doesn't seem to have an opinion whether one way or another they're going to even take this legislation up. But we can't ignore that. We can't just say, oh, the House isn't going to handle this. We've got to figure out a solution on it. So it's tough. It's a tough situation for the association, but I think we can rise to the occasion to work on it and figure it out, and we are doing that right now. So I know the president just stepped out, so I'm happy to take any questions. Yes, sir.
One of the things that I'm skeptical too about future state revenue and how it's used, how it's appropriated. But I mentioned in my legislature that one of the things they could do to reassure me that this was indeed going to be kept to counties would be to lock it down. And after the dust settles, the bipartisan compromise that gets worked out between the House, Senate, and administration is to lock it down with a constitutional amendment.
That's the only way to do it.
That's the only way to do it, and that would guarantee us as counties that a degree of predictability in our long-term budget. And so, is that something that you think can be discussed as we go forward with it?
Right now, I think everything's on the table, and where we may be headed, if the legislation is not passed during this session, where we may be headed is a study of these issues to even contemplate whether or not there's a constitutional amendment for that very fact. So I think that's part of the mix. Yes, sir. There are not any other questions, and again, I'm happy to talk to you one-on-one. I'm happy to travel wherever you want me to travel to your county and talk with your commissioners. We're fortunate that you're in this room. There are commissioners who do not come to our association events, and I personally would love to be able to get all 100% of all of our commissioners to an association event. You are the choir, and whatever I can do to come and speak with those who are not as engaged as you are, you please let me know. I will make the time to be there. Mr. President, if I may turn the microphone over to our General Counsel to talk about
You may please welcome Amy Bason. Amy, of course, is more than just an attorney for our association. She works on many different levels. We appreciate her so much. Amy, tell us how good everything's going.
Thank you. And I want to say a thank you to Commissioner McClure for pointing out that the association's involvement in amicus briefs was something that I'm going to talk about in a minute about the Davidson County case, but I want to talk about the Union County case first. But that is something that we try to look at cases that do have potential statewide impacts and that are coming out of individual counties, but take that ability, if the board so approves, to then point out to the court that that individual decision will not only impact the county that it's coming out of, that it has statewide implications. And one of the crowning cases for that currently is this Union County case that I know you've been hearing so much about, which resulted in the legislative goal to get rid of the statutory mediation, statutory lawsuit ability for the boards of education when they do not receive the appropriations that they request. So as I'm sure you've heard about this case so often, so just in a nutshell, as you recall, this was a situation where the Union County Board of Education made a request of the Board of County Commissioners, and they could not come to an agreement. They went to mediation, and at the end of the day, the difference between what was requested by the Board of Education and what was granted by the commissioners was about $9 million between operating and capital. They then, statute allows for a process where they went to court immediately, ended up in a 9-week trial. And what happened after that was a jury looked at that and said, I know that you had a dispute of $9 million, but we're going to award you $91 million. So you can imagine what that did to the county and finances, and that would result in a significant increase in taxes. There would be no other way to accomplish that. There was a stay, fortunately, so that was not immediately required. But what happened was there was an appeal. This was something that we recognized, and you as a board recognized that this has significant statewide implications, and so we participated on an amicus or front of the court level. And just a couple weeks ago, a decision came down, and we like to report that it was a favorable decision. The Court of Appeals agreed that that verdict was improper. And what they said was that what the jury did in that case was look at requests that were outside of that budget year. They were allowed to take in evidence from past years, many things that were not actually requested by the Board of Education in this specific budget year, and the Court of Appeals said that was improper. I will say, though, that's not the end. What the court said was we overturn that, but we send it back for a rehearing. So if you hear that the Union County case is over and everything is great, that is not the case. And a dispute, according to this opinion, is what is in dispute in that current budget year. But again, this is going back to trial, so Union County, I talked to the county attorney, and he has highlighted, and this is again the importance of this association and our advocacy efforts and the goals, that legislation about getting rid of this ability to sue is still very much of significance in Union County because they are getting indications that there may yet be another round in Union County in this current budget year. So things are not over. And as I've said at district meetings, and you've heard me, I don't want to cast aspersions on my brethren in the legal community and the legal profession, but really the only folks who benefit out of this are the lawyers. I mean, they've made, I don't know how many millions of dollars probably off these cases and legal fees that are all ultimately paid by the county. So, there really, we feel like needs to be a better solution. And so this is a good verdict. This is good. And we will continue to monitor and continue to work on the legislative level for that goal. But we wanted to report that to you and thank you for the ability to file this amicus brief because we really do think it helped. And the decision actually did cite some of the information in the amicus brief, so we think that made an impact. So there is that case. And the other case I wanted to talk about was the one that Commissioner McClure talked about in Davidson County. This had to do with a property tax appeal. Unfortunately, this one did not. The decision came out the same day. And this decision, the Court of Appeals sided with, not with the county, but against the county. And it had to do with the assessed value of Parkdale Mills. They had warehouses. And essentially what the Property Tax Commission said after some back and forth is that those warehouses are assessed as vacant properties, not operating. And the assessed values provided by the Parkdale Mills was significantly lower than what the county assessed the property values at. And the Property Tax Commission agreed with Parkdale Mills. The Court of Appeals upheld that. And I, with your permission, Commissioner Beal, if there's anything that Commissioner McClure would like to add on this case since it came out of Davidson County, but I think currently where it stands is the county is deciding whether or not they will ask the Supreme Court to take up the case. Since it was a unanimous decision, the Supreme Court does not have to take up the case. Frankly, in my opinion and discussions with the county attorney, we think it's unlikely that the Supreme Court would, but that's where things stand right now.
The real problem with this is that if the Supreme Court does take it up and push it back, it will not go back to the valuation of the buildings. It goes back to whether or not the Property Tax Commission considered all of the information that they should have considered. We actually won this twice. We went to court with it twice, and we won both times. And they changed the entire board for after the elections, and they got a new board. And the last time they kicked it down there to them to look at, they decided in favor of Parkdale Mills. We appealed it. We had the information ready to show them about how much money they were making off of this property, and they would not allow us to present it. And when we couldn't present that, they decided again against us, and we won't be able to present that information even if we go to the Supreme Court and win, which we probably won't. It cost $10,000, according to our attorney, to appeal it to the Supreme Court. And there's not much chance of coming out. But I will say this, that our county attorney and our commissioners were very much appreciative of the alliance that the association here and the willingness of this association to participate with us in that suit. It we thought added a great deal of weight to the argument that we had. Thank you.
Thank you. And I now realize that the president is standing behind me, so that is my speech to be quiet. Thank you, and I'll answer any questions that you have at the end of the time.
Give Andy a good hand. I mean, we're very fortunate. And I will say this. You heard Fred speak about what can happen. Just a word of warning. If you have a big box store in your town, of any company, of any size, I would be very careful. If they can do this to a warehouse, there's no difference in doing it to any big box store you might have in your county. Any big box store. I'll be hearing more about that a little later on. So I would be very careful because it could really be devastating to a lot of counties. So anyway,